if I win against you, what does that make you? Loser. You don't want to work with someone who makes you feel like a loser.
In this episode, you learn what the most influential communicators do instead to get buy-in, build influence, and actually get what they want.
Persuasion is shared action. It's shared because it's something that we voluntarily do with others, and it's action because it's about getting things done.
We break down the neuroscience of persuasion, why facts rarely change minds, and the simple communication shifts that make others want to say yes to you. And there's no one better to unpack this than Joshua Bandoch. He's the author of How to Get What You Want. My name is Oliver Aust. I've helped over 300 CEOs master communications, and this is Speak Like a CEO, the show that helps you become a top 1% communicator. Your book is called How to Get What You Want, and to get what I want, I usually need to persuade someone. So how do I go about it?
You got to understand what persuasion is and then follow 3 simple steps that hope we can dive into today. Just kind of real quick, what persuasion is, 2 things that it's not. It's not about winning because, Oliver, if I win against you, what does that make you?
Loser, I guess.
Loser. Oh my God, that's terrible. That's terrible. And you don't want to work with someone who makes you feel like a loser. And the second is that it's not about convincing someone to think just like you. So what is persuasion? Persuasion is shared action. It's shared because it's something that we voluntarily do with others. And it's action because it's about getting things done. And this is a big mindset shift. And this is the best way to durably get what you want time after time after time. And then you follow what I think are 3 simple, but not at all easy steps to do that.
I love the 3-step framework in the book because I think it makes something very complex really simple to follow for all of us out there. And I'm sure I'm guilty of all the mistakes you call out in the book. They're trying to win arguments, bringing all the data and all that good stuff. But let's do one step at a time. The first one is the persuader's mindset, right? So adapt the persuader's mindset. What does that mean?
A big thing that's a theme throughout the book is understanding how we're wired and how to navigate that wiring. So we're guilty of these things insofar as everybody's wired this way. So what's the first big one? We are wired to think and talk all about ourselves. So we put ourselves at the center of everything. Talking about ourselves generates the same sensations in our brain as sex and money. So it feels really good. And that means that we end up adopting what I call a me first mindset. Small problem with that. If you're dealing with something really tricky, really challenging, and I just make it all about me, it could offend you. So what you have to do is fight your wiring to think and talk about yourself and flip it around and put them first. So the persuader's mindset has a simple insight, not easy. It's about them, not you, because you're trying to persuade somebody else. You already know that you're right. So it's like, okay, well, cool. If I want somebody else to do something, then I have to understand them and understand what their goals are and how what I want to do aligns with their goals. Because if my goals aren't your goals, we're not going to work together. But if I can understand your goals and show how what I want helps you meet some or all of them, you're way more inclined to work with me.
You see me nodding because I think in theory, this is 100% clear, right? In practice, not so easy to do, right? Because often I see people going on stage or starting a presentation. I'm sure their mindset is on, hey, I'll make this about the audience. And yet it doesn't quite happen. So where's the disconnect here between our good intention and then making it about ourselves?
I think the disconnect comes in part by thinking that everyone sees things our way. And actually, only one person sees things your way. And then how committed are you to listening and truly understanding the other side on their terms? Because I can think I understand you, but then if I can't express that to you in a way that makes you nod and say, yeah, Josh gets me, or no, that's not it. If I don't understand you on your terms, and I think that's the disconnect, that a lot of people think they understand the audience, but it's not on the audience's terms. And even there's this like rascally little critter that gets in the way of so many things. Why? It's like, well, like, why do you think something? And we might actually see the same problem and we might want the same solution. But if your why is different and I don't like your why, or I won't appeal to your why and I fight your why, then even though we share problem and solution, we get stuck and we can't understand each other and we can't work together.
Yeah, makes no sense, right? The trap can be judgment. The trap can be, I assume I know what you think or why you think certain things, and none of that is helpful. In the book, there was a sentence that stuck with me, which is persuasion geniuses have a clear vision. Can you speak to that? Because I think that struck a chord with me.
Thank you. big picture. What animates action? It's vision. Because if you're a leader, if you're a CEO, if you lead a team, or even if you're trying to lead your own life, you have to have a vision. You got to know where you're going. You have to see that clearly. You got to know what your North Star is. Because if your team doesn't know, whether it's a team of 2 or 10 or 10,000, if they don't know where you're going and you can't communicate that, then you're definitely not going to get there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? We need that positive vision and to be for something, not just against something. I think that is often lacking in the political debate and the economic debate within organizations, that we're against something, but it's better to be for something.
1000%. And that kind of pivots us a little bit to the second part of the book, because the second part of the book is to use knowledge of how our brains work to our advantage. And this book has a lot of neuroscience and psychology. This part in particular is all neuroscience and psychology for starters. And you have two options. You either can understand and navigate our cognitive wiring, or you can ignore it.
Definitely not ignore it. I see this a lot, that a speaker, communicator tries to fight the brain, works against human biology. And I would say, let's work with human biology. But there was a sentence in that chapter which, again, really resonated. And it is, our brains aren't wired for persuasion. And that was new to me.
We're not. So there are 3 aspects of our wiring that make it really hard to persuade. And I'll tell you at the end how we fix this. The first, we think that persuasion is all about logic and reason and data. It's not. All 8 billion humans on this earth are wired to feel first, then reason, which means that persuasion starts with feelings. Okay. Then the question is, what kinds of feelings? You already alluded to this. We are wired to be negative, and negativity is not persuasive. Positivity is. So you have to be for something. And we're wired to appeal to our own values, even if they offend somebody else. And the worst way to ever get somebody to work with you now or later is to offend their values. How do we fix this? You've got to flip your perspective, and you've got to ask, what if I were on the receiving end of any of these things? Intuitively, I would not feel so good. So it can be safe. That's the quick version of all this.
Yeah, I love it. And reminds me of a quote by Tamsin Webster. She said this on this podcast a couple of years ago. Tell the people the story, they would tell themselves about the thing we are talking about.
Oh, 1,000,000%. That's the 4th chapter of these 4 in the middle part of the book. What is the best way to make powerful, emotional, values-based appeals and being for something? What is the best way to persuade, period? The single best tool that exists is stories. And part of what I try to lead up to in that chapter is that one thing that we really never get is what kinds of stories, because everyone knows that stories are persuasive. So what I unpack in the chapter is that the most persuasive stories are morally motivating, emotionally intelligent stories. So you got to think about what you want your audience to feel and how you're going to generate those positive feelings. You have to be for things. You have to appeal to their values so that they feel good. And then when they think about it, they feel even better. And then that story captures all of those things, and they remember that. Because I heard recently someone talking about what we remember from stories versus data. We remember about 65% of what we hear from stories, and we remember like 5% of what we hear from data. So stories are just like infinitely more effective than data ever could be.
Yeah, and yet often experts, and myself included, probably we use the data dump, or there's a logic tsunami, as you call it, right? It just doesn't seem to be the right tactic to persuade anyone.
100%. And look, nobody walks around and they're like, hey man, I feel first, and I just kind of stop there. And a lot of people who are intellectually oriented, whether it's a CEO, an academic, someone who works at a think tank, a number cruncher at a marketing organization, whatever, they think, well, I'm logical, and so therefore that's how things are supposed to be. And it's like, well, first of all, it turns out that emotions actually enhance our reasoning. People who suffer brain damage and tragically lose the ability to emote, their reasoning is actually impaired. So it's like, no, actually emotions are really important. And still people fight this. And they think, well, the more logic, the better.
90% of presentations are forgotten within a day, and even the best ideas get ignored. Over the last 20 years, I've helped hundreds of leaders prepare for stages like TED and South by Southwest, and the difference is always the same. Top 1% communicators, they use a system, and this system is called the Perfect Presentation Planner. Download it now, it's free, link in the description. We are born with feelings and emotions, and we communicate along those lines, but we're trained to think logically and bury these, yet this is what happens to be the most persuasive part. So how do I tell an emotionally intelligent, morally motivating story?
Except that you have to start with feelings. How do you generate positive feelings? You have to be for something. So, like in the opportunity space, like I said, that's one of the policy hats that I wear. And I am for opportunity and thriving and dignity through work and strong families, creating value for others, all these sorts of things. I'm not only against bad policies. Okay. And then how are you going to appeal to your audience's values, even if they're not your values, which means you have to understand them. So research the organization. If you're giving a speech, research them, look at their language, look at how they think about things, have a pre-call. If you're, given a keynote address or you're just talking to a new client, you say, hey, can you just give me a sense, like, what are your goals? What are your values as an organization? And make sure you don't offend them and then try to appeal to them. And a lot of intellectually oriented people are scared to make moral appeals, and morals drive everything that we do. So don't be afraid. If you know that there's a moral value that your audience holds, just appeal to it authentically. Don't say things you don't believe, and appeal to it because it's really powerful. And we remember those things. And all that has to be couched in the arc of a story.
Do you have a framework here you can recommend for the arc of the story?
You want to show through the hero's actions why this was such a powerful story. Let me give an example that I talk about in the book. I was a speechwriter for the Air Force Secretary, and we had the task of writing a speech to commemorate Sergeant John Chapman, who was posthumously being awarded the Medal of Honor, which is the greatest honor that anybody who serves in uniform can receive in America. So what did I think about? Okay, well, what is my audience, which is going to be a combination of men and women in uniform, other kind of military types, Sergeant Chapman's family, the president was at one of the events. What are their values? Well, they're going to, for example, be interested in loyalty and patriotism, okay? And they're going to really want to hear about how great John Chapman was. So I talked about his merit and his hard work, proportionality, another value that people tend to have, and how much he cared about his country and how much he cared about the man that he went into battle to save, somebody who had fallen out of a helicopter, and how he wanted to protect our freedom, which is like, especially an American thing, freedom, freedom, freedom. So throughout the speech, I wove in references to these things because we know that these sorts of things make somebody feel. And I talked about the courageous actions that Sergeant Chapman took. And we even had mini stories inside the story talking about how excellent he was. So it's like, it's basically show, don't tell through a story and his actions, and then framing it in a way that resonates with the audience. And what we did there was we framed it in the Star Spangled Banner. So in America, we sing this at sporting events, "Oh, say, can you see in the home of the brave?" And it's sung with an explanation point. But Francis Scott Key actually wrote it with a question mark. And so the framing of the speech was that it was not evident then, nor is it now, that America will remain the land of the free and the home of the brave. And it's because of people like John Chapman that we stay free, that we maintain our freedom. So it was this arc, this meta story inside Sergeant Chapman's story, and a story about America, kind of all tied together.
Wow, I mean, that's very moving. And you obviously had a good inkling what the values of the audience are. And it's actually not that complicated, right? Because often you can guess, am I talking to a boardroom full of business people? Am I talking to unionized workforce?
Exactly.
Often values are even on the website of an organization. So often it's just literally a minute of thinking about it and not skipping this step, and then making sure that it's not us who are the heroes in the story, but it's usually the audience, and we are guiding them.
Super important. And I'm going to give your audience a couple of shortcuts to figure this out. So one shortcut is when you want to engage somebody, instead of asking what they think about something, ask how they feel about something, because that gives you instant access to what they really think, and they're unguarded in the answer, positive, negative, and what exactly. And then make sure that you understand their values. And one really good way to do this is to ask them what they think is fair. What would a
Mm.
fair outcome be? Because in that, everybody cares about fairness. So those are two early things that if you can understand that, you're going to be at least pointed really quickly in the direction that your audience is going.
Yeah. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. What's step 3?
Step 3 is to essentially adopt tested techniques.
Mm-hmm.
3 of them. I talk about negotiation, the need to go beyond words, and then maybe the funnest part of the book is to pass the grading test. In fact, to ace it. Negotiation, we're doing that all the time, and persuasion is foundational to that. I'll flag 2 things that I think are a little bit counterintuitive that are
Mm-hmm.
super important. I used to think that persuasion was all about getting somebody to do something. And over the decade of researching and practicing all this stuff, I've realized that it's much more about identifying barriers. What's stopping somebody? Because they're not doing it now, and there's a reason for it. Why not? So, in your conversation, it's really important to say, what would stop you from signing this contract? What would stop you from increasing what you buy from us? Whatever it is, the action you want them to take, what would stop them? And then listen, because you might think, oh, they're not signing this deal because they don't have the money for it. And it could be, in fact, that maybe they just have a contract with another vendor that ends in 6 months and then they can talk to you. Or it could be that they are so committed to this other vendor because it's a 20-year relationship, they will never sign with you. And if you don't understand what's stopping them, you don't know how to proceed.
Yes, then it fizzles out and it's this like, oh yeah, thanks for, stopping by and, we get back to you, send us something by email, that sort of thing, right? And nothing happens.
Exactly. And that's also where you bring feelings back into it. How do you feel about this? Oh yeah, like I feel good, but I got to think about it. Okay, well, what would stop you? Okay, well, I like it, but I have to talk to my partner. Okay, they're not the barrier. The partner's the barrier. Or look, I
Mm-hmm.
love this. I just I don't know if we have the money for it. Okay, it's a cost issue. What can you do there? And if you don't know what the barriers are, you can't remove them. And we just assume that, oh, that's the barrier. And it could be nothing even close to that. The other thing is that we like to talk about win-wins and what you're going to win from a deal. And human beings are actually wired to be much more concerned with loss. So this is the work of Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky in particular. Danny Kahneman won the Nobel Prize for this work. We loss stings 5 to 10 times as much as a gain. So if I take $1,000 or euros from you to make you feel whole again, I have to give you 5 to 10,000 euros back. So what that means is that you want to present things in terms of losses instead of saying, well, hey, don't you want to, increase your sales by 10% with our product? You could say something like, how would you feel about losing 10% per quarter uh, without this product? And like, oh my
Mm-hmm.
God, I'm losing something. Or you might say, look, I don't want us to lose out on the opportunity to work together. And right now I had this spot open and my spots are filling up quickly. So I just don't want you to lose out. Like, oh my God, I don't want to lose out. So frame things in terms of losses and people just respond to that totally differently.
Yeah, without coming across as manipulative, right? Because that could cause reactance. I think there's always there's that thin line. It has to be genuine, it has to be ethical.
Oh my God, 1,000,000%. People always ask me, what's the difference between persuasion and manipulation? And it's all about intentions. Think about the Force in Star Wars. Do you want to be Yoda or the Emperor? Do you want to be Luke Skywalker or Darth Vader? When you have a knife, you can use that to prepare a beautiful meal for your family or to do somebody great harm. Don't manipulate. It's wrong and it's going to come back to bite you. So bad news. And the authenticity, you said that I want to underline that too, because if you're not authentic in what you say, people are going to know it. And when they find out, they're not going to trust you. And you're probably never going to be able to earn their trust. So it's really bad idea to be inauthentic.
Absolutely. Any other technique you could share with us?
We think that persuasion is all about the words that we say. Words are super important. I can say things right now that would deeply offend somebody. Okay, bad idea. And you need to go beyond words because when you go beyond words, you can both significantly enhance your effectiveness. And when you go beyond words in the ways that I'll talk about, you don't have to get the words perfect. because people with all these other things are going to receive it perfectly. So a couple of things I'll just flag quickly. One is to be likable. That doesn't mean someone's going to like you. Be likable. The second is to watch your tone. Because if I say, Oliver, that's a great idea. It's like, okay, cool. Like, I'm excited. And if I say, Oliver, that's a great idea. Same
Yeah.
words, totally different tone. For anybody seeing this on camera, I roll my eyes too, which is a sign of contempt, which means watch your body language.
Yeah.
Because so often somebody will say what we want to hear, and you can see in their face, I don't know about that. Watch somebody's body language. And
Totally. Tone of voice, body language, all that nonverbal stuff is so important, right? If I try to convince you that my solution for your problem is the best in the market,
yeah.
I have to project it. It's not enough to say our solution is the best, right? That doesn't cut it. You have to say our solution is the best in the market. We're absolutely convinced of that.
100%. Whether your tone is tentative, I don't know, maybe it's a good solution, maybe not. Oh, that's no good. If your tone is abrasive, I'll encounter people and it's just like, ugh, right? Like I don't want to engage that person. And actually, like you said earlier, reactance. You experience reactance just because somebody's tone is unwelcoming or maybe even antagonistic.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you mentioned the granny test. What is that?
It's the best one because all the stuff we talked about, adopting the persuader's mindset, using all the psychology to your advantage, is all for naught if you cannot ace the granny test. The granny test is super simple and it's not easy. Would your granny understand what you're saying? And granny is not stupid. Granny is smart. Granny's just not an expert in things. And you would think, this is really easy. Well, in my previous life, I was an academic. And I I once attended a seminar with a grad student in his program. It was #1 program in the field. This is like a shooting star in his space. And he gave a presentation, and I'm sitting there like, I am like beyond puzzled. I don't understand a word that he's saying, and I feel so stupid. And then a really famous professor in the room, as soon as the kid finishes his presentation, he raises his hand, and I'm like, oh my God, he's just gonna, and then he says, I didn't understand a word that you just said. And I was like, ooh, okay, so it wasn't just me. By contrast, this same professor, I saw him give a lecture once, and he said, and it sounded so arrogant, he said, my superpower is that I make really complicated things simple. And I thought, no, you don't. And then an hour later, at the end of his lecture, I thought, yeah, you do. He took so many super complicated things, made them simple. My granny would have followed every single word. Simplicity is a superpower. Cultivate it.
It is a superpower. I was in a room recently where someone's explained Claude AI and the wonderful things you could do with co-work and so on. And someone raised their hand and said, "You just broke my brain," which was probably not the feedback I'm looking for. But I thought it was very honest. And then half the room was just nodding and saying, "Yeah, same. You just broke my brain." So simplicity, superpower, granny test. I love it. And it reminds me of something Paul Probst, former chief architect NASA, said on this podcast a few weeks ago, which was when they collaborated with Pixar. Pixar said it's about gettability. Like, do people get it immediately? I love this. Never heard it before. Gettability. Like, do you get it? Granny test. Awesome. Granny gets it. We're golden, right?
Oh, it's golden. Look, if Granny understands, it means that you are crystal clear. And if you can bring clarity with all the things that we talked about, really making it about them and appealing to their values in an emotionally intelligent manner, oh my goodness, the sky is the absolute limit.
Yeah. If you confuse, you lose. Love it. Josh, this is so good. The book's lovely. Tell us more about where can people get the book and find out more about you, connect with you, etc.
Well, you can get the book anywhere books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever. And you can learn more about me checking out my website, joshuabandoch.com, or find me on LinkedIn. Those are all great ways to connect with me.
Perfect. And we'll link to that, of course. My final question is always, what's the best piece of communications advice?
I think that each and every day, we are faced in every interaction, personal and professional, with a choice. Do I want to be right, or do I want to make a difference? Being right is super easy. Launch the logic tsunamis. Making a difference, that's what persuasion is, and that's what the book offers you, an opportunity time after time after time to make a difference and ultimately get even more than you thought you ever could.
Yeah. Josh, thank you.
Amazing. Oliver, thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you like this episode, please subscribe to the Speak Like a CEO channel. It means the world to me, and it helps us keep bringing you world-class insights and guests.